Sagittarius. Someone from your past is losing their grip, but you're finally free. Sagittarius, there are strange moments in life when you think you're still standing in the same place, still exactly where you used to be. But in reality, the map inside you has quietly changed direction a long time ago. I remember once, a woman named Claire, 47 years old, came to my consultation room. She was a classic Sagittarius. Strong, rational, beautifully practical, and always choosing to stand up even when she wasn't ready. She told me that morning while driving to work, her heart suddenly tightened for a few seconds. Not pain, not missing someone, just a feeling that's hard to describe. It felt like I left something behind, she said, her hands clutching the coffee cup as if holding a secret. But I don't know what it is. She thought it was longing. She thought it was a bad omen. She thought it was a sign that someone from the past was thinking about her. But when I asked, "What were you thinking about when that feeling came?" she was silent for a long time, then let out a soft breath, as if something had been released. I was thinking about myself, the version of me that no longer exists. It turned out that what she felt wasn't the return of someone else. It was the departure of something inside herself. She said that for years, whenever she heard a familiar song, passed by an old street, or saw someone who looked like her ex, her heart would still reflexively clench. Not because she was still in love, but because a part of her was still standing there. An old harbor, an unerased memory, a question she never dared to answer. But that morning, when the tightness passed and disappeared, she realized she no longer reacted the way she used to. No more choking sensation. No more confusion. No more running from the feeling. She just stood there, quiet, but no longer in pain. "It's like my emotional map suddenly shifted position," she said. "I'm still me, but I no longer live in that old territory. Yet somehow I thought I was still standing there." And I looked at Claire, as if I were looking at you right now, and whispered, "You're not lost. You've just found your new path again." Sagittarius, I believe you're in that moment too, the moment when you feel something shifting inside but you haven't named it yet. You no longer hurt the way you did, but you don't yet know what to be happy about. You no longer wish they'd come back, but you don't understand why you suddenly feel so light. You don't realize it, but your heart has moved. You don't realize it, but pain is no longer your starting point. You don't realize it, but you've already stepped onto a different part of the map. Part you've never stood on before. A part that no one from the past can reach anymore. A part that belongs only to you, of the present and of the new journey. And that is the true beginning of today's story. Map 1 First marker. The moment you realize you're no longer standing in the old place. I had a client named Melissa, 52 years old, also a Sagittarius. A woman who at first glance seemed to have everything. A good job, a tidy little house, 2 grown children, and a circle of friends always around her. But like most Sagittarians, she carried silences that outsiders never saw. Silences not because she was weak, but because she always handled her own storms before anyone else noticed. A few months ago, Melissa told me about a small but strange thing that happened. It was a Friday afternoon, light rain. She left the office earlier than usual to avoid traffic. As she drove past an old street, the one she and her ex used to visit every weekend, she instinctively slowed down. Not to remember, not to reminisce, just an unconscious reflex. But then she was surprised by what didn't happen. "I thought my heart would tighten like it always did," she said. "But it didn't. I thought I'd feel uncomfortable or sad, or at least confused. But I just kept driving, as if that memory no longer touched me." She said she even turned her head to look at the old cafe. The door was still open. The lights were warm just like before. A few people were still sitting in the same corner, laughter ringing out. But instead of the familiar sting, she only smiled, very lightly, so lightly that even she couldn't quite believe it. "It was strange," she said, her fingers unconsciously twisting her ring. "I kept thinking I was still tied to that place. But it turns out I'm not. I no longer belong there." That moment came without warning, without drama, without tears. It came like a passing breeze, but strong enough to make her pause for a few seconds in the parking lot near her house, hands still on the steering wheel, heart flooded with something strange. She was no longer standing inside the old story, even though she had thought she was still stuck there. Sagittarians are rational, but they're also deeply loyal to their own emotions. When they've loved someone, even the wrong person, they walk a very long road after it ends. Not because they want to go back, but because they need to understand why they stayed. They need to connect logic to emotion. They need to see their own point of departure. They need to understand themselves before turning the page. And sometimes, in trying so hard to understand, they don't realize they've already quietly moved to a different land. Melissa said that night she came home, turned on the kitchen light, put her bag on the table and stood there for a long time. Not sad, not happy, just feeling as if her body had finally caught up with her soul, after years of being pulled back by old emotions. "I don't know what to call that feeling," she said. I looked at her and gently replied, "That's the moment you saw your new position on the map." We never know exactly when the emotional map changes direction. No one announces it. There's no clear sign. But there's always one small, ordinary moment. So ordinary we almost miss it. When we realize we're standing somewhere we've never stood before. A glance back at the past without being pulled in. A memory that surfaces but no longer makes the heart clench. An old street that suddenly becomes a place I once passed through. Not a place I once belonged to. That is the first marker. The point where the map inside you shifts quietly but profoundly. And Sagittarius, if lately you've had a moment like Melissa, a fleeting lightness, a feeling you can't quite name, an unconscious release, then maybe you too have stepped onto the new land of your map without even realizing it. Map 2-second marker. The moment you realize you've forgiven without anyone ever apologizing. In one of my sessions, there was a man named Jordan, 34 years old, a textbook Sagittarius, sharp-minded, funny, always had a quick answer for everything, except when it came to the stories of his own heart. Jordan had broken up 3 years earlier. A breakup that, in his own words, "No one was clearly wrong, but I was clearly the one who hurt the most." They had been together nearly 4 years. They once lived together in a small apartment right by the beach in Santa Monica, where every morning the sound of waves crashed against the walls like a greeting. But in the end, it wasn't love that broke them. It was direction. His ex wanted stability. Jordan wanted to keep expanding the world. And instead of saying it out loud, his ex slowly withdrew, became distant. That silence hurt Jordan more than anything. He wasn't angry that they left. He was angry that they never said anything, leaving him to fill in the blanks with hundreds of guesses. The day Jordan sat across from me, the wind outside was blowing hard. I remember because his hair kept falling to one side and he kept pushing it back, absent-mindedly, as if trying to hold on to something the wind was taking away. Jordan said, "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive. I don't want them back. But I don't want to hate them either. Yet I still do. I want to be at peace. But every time I remember their silence, I boil inside." I didn't answer right away. Sagittarians often think they haven't forgiven because the feeling is still there. But forgiveness isn't when all feeling disappears. Forgiveness is when the feeling no longer controls you. A month later, Jordan called me after 9 p.m. His voice was calm but softer than before. "Today I had a weird experience," he said. "I was cleaning the closet and found the hoodie my ex left behind. The light gray one, the one with the paint stain on the sleeve. I looked at it, and I laughed." I asked what made him laugh. Jordan said, "Because I realized instead of getting angry remembering everything, I just thought, oh, so this is how far I've come. No pain, no anger, no heart squeezing. Just a gentle truth." Then he was quiet for a moment before adding, "I think I've forgiven, haven't I?" What I told him then is what I want to tell you now, Sagittarius. When the old truth no longer makes your heart clench, that's forgiveness. When you can look back without wanting to return and without wanting revenge, that's freedom. When you simply see, "I'm different now," that's peace. For Sagittarius, forgiveness isn't an action. It doesn't come from logic. It doesn't come from saying, "I have to let go." It doesn't come from effort. It arrives on a perfectly ordinary day, just like when Jordan found that hoodie. It arrives when your heart has walked farther than the memory. When the person you've become has moved forward faster than the pain could follow. Jordan said that night he folded the hoodie, put it in the donation box, sat down on the sofa, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. No tears, no joy, just the feeling that a door had quietly closed from the inside, gently and finally. "I don't need them to come back and apologize anymore," Jordan whispered. Because I'm no longer in the place where that apology could reach me. Sagittarians often think they're strong because of their minds, because of their toughness. But what truly makes them strong is their very unique way of healing. Quietly, without demanding justice, without needing witnesses. Just one day the pain is simply gone. And when they forgive, it's not because the other person deserved it, but because they no longer want to carry something that doesn't belong to them. If lately you've had a small moment like Jordan, smiling at a memory that once weighed your heart down, looking at an old object without hurting, realizing you no longer need anyone to explain anything, then maybe you've already passed through the second gate on your map. Map 3, third marker. The moment you realize you're stronger than the version of you that once broke. I remember an old client of mine, Evan, 29 years old, a young Sagittarius, talented, full of ambition, but carrying a pain he hid very well. Evan didn't suppress with logic. He drowned the empty spaces with busyness. Packed schedules, endless plans, weekends filled with spontaneous trips. Also, he wouldn't have to sit alone with the past. One day, Evan told me a story that marked how much farther he had gone than he thought. It was a chilly Sunday morning. Evan was jogging around a small lake near his house, his usual way of refreshing the mind. As he reached the stretch lined with golden falling leaves, he suddenly saw a couple arguing softly. Not shouting, but clearly upset about who wasn't being heard. The guy looked confused, the girl was holding back tears, voice breaking. Evan slowed down, then stopped completely. Not to eavesdrop, but because a strange feeling rose in his chest. Not pain, but recognition. He told me. At that moment I suddenly saw the old me. I too once stood in front of someone I loved, trying to explain things they should have understood on their own. I saw how much I used to suffer just like them. And suddenly I felt sorry for the old me. That feeling wasn't pain coming back. It wasn't regret either. It was like watching a younger person struggle with something you've already overcome. No wound reopened, only understanding. Evan continued. I stood there for a bit, then kept running. But as I ran again, I felt like I had just crossed something huge. Like I was no longer the version of me who used to beg to be loved. When I heard that, I knew Evan had touched the third marker on his map. The moment a Sagittarius realizes they've changed, grown, become someone the old pain can no longer hold. Evan had always been the smart Sagittarian who found escape routes with his mind, but his heart stayed lonely for a long time after the hurt. Yet that day, watching someone else's conflict, he realized he had already walked past that place, no longer stuck. Not because anyone apologized, not because the memories vanished, but because he was no longer the person who had to endure that. Sagittarius has a special strength. They never coldly shake off pain. They heal by outgrowing it. You don't have to forget the ex. You don't have to deny what happened. You just have to become a version that those memories can't pull backward. And that moment, when Evan watched the couple by the lake and saw himself from 3 years ago, made him understand something crucial. I'm no longer the guy who had to prove he was worth loving. I know I'm worth it. And that's why the past can't do anything to me anymore. You see, Sagittarians often think they're still fragile somewhere in the past. But actually, their strength doesn't come roaring like thunder. It comes quietly, like a morning when you realize you no longer want to be the person you once were. If lately you've had a moment like Evan, seeing someone else's story and realizing how far you've come, looking back at yourself and feeling light, realizing you no longer need answers from what once hurt you, then you may have already walked through the third gate, the gate of quiet maturity. It's not that you're strong because you no longer hurt. It's that you're stronger than the version who did, by miles. Map for fourth marker. When the universe starts sending new people and you realize you no longer belong to the old loop. During a late-night session, I met Alicia, a 38-year-old Sagittarius who once said something that still haunts me. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm only afraid I'll keep connecting with the wrong people forever. Alicia was the refined kind of Sagittarius. Independent, educated, but she had chosen the wrong person a few times, not out of weakness, but because she always saw more potential in others than they saw in themselves. Like many Sagittarians, she used to believe, if they just tried a little harder, everything would be different. But life doesn't run on potential. It runs on truth. One day Alicia told me a story that mattered. A sign she had stepped into new territory on her emotional map without even noticing. She was at a tech networking event in Austin. Warm evening, golden sunlight pouring over glass buildings. She went for work, not to find anything for her heart. Barely any makeup. Hair tied back simply, white t-shirt and dark blazer. At the drink station, a man, Daniel, ended up standing next to her. They exchanged a few polite words. No sparks. No cinematic moment. Just a normal conversation between two adults. She said. What surprised me wasn't the man. It was how I behaved. I asked what she meant. Alicia said she was completely natural. No acting. No trying. No inner voice asking, am I being too much? No adjusting herself to be more palatable. No running the old script that used to chase her. I mustn't be too strong, too direct, too forward. None of that. She was just herself. A version that didn't apologize for existing. I realized I'm no longer afraid of being too much, she said. And for the first time in years, I didn't think about my ex once while talking to someone new. That sentence carried weight. Because Sagittarians aren't usually haunted by the person. They're haunted by the lesson the person left. They paid with their heart, so they remember with their mind. And sometimes that very mind makes them guarded with anyone new. But that day Alicia didn't compare. Didn't defend. Didn't pre-write the story in her head. She just stood in the afternoon light, talking to a stranger as if she had stepped into completely new air. Air where the past was no longer the standard. When she reached that part, she sighed and said, I think I've left the old loop. No drama, no big scene. I just don't belong there anymore. That's the moment many Sagittarians don't recognize right away. When the universe starts sending people who don't press on your old scars, but touch the person you're becoming, and you realize you no longer attract people who lack emotional responsibility. The ones who used to make you insecure now feel out of frequency. You naturally talk with ease to people who carry healthy energy. You no longer feel the need to prove you're worth loving. You don't measure the present with the ruler of the past. That is the subtlest and most accurate sign that you've stepped onto new land. What's special about Sagittarius is, they don't leap into love out of haste. They step in with awareness. They don't need someone new to forget someone old. They only need a sign that they've gone farther than they thought. And when Alicia told me that story, I didn't see a woman looking for love. I saw a woman finally calm enough for love to find her. If lately you've met someone, even by chance, who makes you feel comfortable immediately, who doesn't trigger your old vigilance, who makes the ex not appear in your mind for even 1 second, who lets you be exactly you, no editing, no shrinking, then you might be standing at the 4th marker of the journey, the place where you no longer walk in old wheel ruts. A new forest is opening in front of you, Sagittarius. And this time you're not carrying the things that used to weigh you down. Map 5 final marker. When you realize the most important person coming back is you. That same night, Alicia called me again. Not to tell a new story, but to share a very peaceful moment that had just happened. She said, Sophia, I think I've reached the end of the map. Not because I found someone new, but because I finally feel I've come back to myself. She told me she opened her laptop and accidentally reread old emails she sent during the months she tried to hold on to a love that was already cracked. Instead of pain, she just smiled. A warm smile that surprised even her. I feel sorry for that girl, Alicia said. But I'm no longer sad for her. I'm grateful to her. Because without her, there would be no me today. When she said that, I knew Alicia had touched the 5th marker, the one every Sagittarius eventually reaches. The moment you become the person you once wished would come save you. No apology needed. No return needed. No one needed to look at you and say, you deserved better. You see it in your own eyes. And that is the end of the map. You become the person you were waiting for. Sagittarians never recover in noise. They recover on an ordinary evening when they notice they're sitting up straighter, taking a deep breath, and feeling that their heart finally is no longer slipping out of their hands. Alicia said she finally opened the drawer she'd been avoiding. A few old things, a few keepsakes. She picked each one up, no trembling, no tears. Just gently placed them into a box. Not erasing the past. Honoring it, then walking into the next chapter. When I closed the lid, she said, it felt like I ended an old life. But what surprised me was, it didn't hurt at all. It just felt like it's time. Sagittarians often think they're only strong when they feel nothing. But the truth is, Sagittarians are strongest when they start feeling themselves again. Not emptiness, not armor, but quiet peace. A truly healed Sagittarius never shouts, "I'm okay now." They just live differently, and they're the first to notice. And Alicia, at that moment, finally saw she was no longer inside the old story. You will reach this moment too. Maybe sooner than you think. Maybe you're already very close, you just haven't named it yet. One evening when you look back at your journey and whisper, "I don't know when, but I've changed." That's when the map brings you home. Sagittarius, this journey isn't just Alicia's story. Not just Jordan's. Not just Melissa's. It's yours too. And you know what? The stories you carry, soft, broken, or still nameless, have the power to heal you and every other Sagittarius wandering in the same darkness. I want to hear your story. Which point on the map do you feel you're standing at right now? Have you ever experienced something like Alicia, Jordan, or Melissa? Which marker made you realize you're different now? You don't have to write a lot. You don't have to write beautifully. You don't have to name anyone. Just speak from the heart. So I can listen. So you can breathe out. And so everyone reading this knows they're not walking alone. Leave your story in the comments. And if you don't know where to start, just begin with, "Sophia, I think I'm at map." I'll read. I'll feel. And maybe your story will become the inspiration for the next message the universe wants to send through me.